Welcome back to the Fox 7 Sports Office. Julian Martinez here, and big time game on the schedule this week. Longhorns, Michigan. So I got to get an expert opinion. So coming to us from our Fox Detroit station, 2023 Sportscaster of the Year, Jennifer Hammond. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. And anytime it's college football season and I can be talking football, I am a happy girl.
Let's talk about how the defending national champions are 6-point dogs in Ann Arbor. If you told me at the start of the season we would be talking about this, might have said it was so crazy, but what do you think?
Yeah, I do think it's crazy. And I actually was in conversation with some of my colleagues the other night about this. And I think it may have even moved to 7. So it is a very fluid line. And it's interesting. This is one of 4 top 25 opponents that the Wolverines will face. And this is the earliest that they've played this kind of stiff competition. If you look all the way back throughout really the Harbaugh era, they've always played a lot of very easy games in the beginning. I don't want to call them cupcakes because in the Big Ten, there's a lot of talented players. But Michigan has been dominant. They've won 23 straight at home. So for them to be taking on Texas this early in the season when they've really yet to work out all of their kinks per se, it's definitely daunting for that team.
So let's talk about kind of why I think that line shifted. The Fresno State game. It was not an ideal start to the season for them because you never want to be against a Mountain West team and it's a 6-point game deep into the fourth quarter. And that's exactly what happened against Fresno State. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have the Longhorns taking on Colorado State, and they decide to hang 50 on them and shut them out for the first time since like the mid-2000s. So it was polar opposites against 2 Mountain West opponents, although I do think Fresno State is better than Colorado State in the long run. What do you think went into that game, and why do you think it was as ugly as it ended up becoming?
Well, I do think the part of the issue is the fact that their offense really lost so many guys. They only have one starter that returned on offense. And the core of that team was the defensive front and the offensive front. And when you lose your offensive line, especially in the Big Ten in a conference when you guys are completely run oriented, it's going to be a big sell to get those guys back in order and get that line back to what it is. Because, I mean, it's the heartbeat of the offense, right? So they lose their quarterback. They also lose receivers. They lose, Blake Corum, a Heisman-worthy candidate at running back, and the offensive line. They've just lost too many critical pieces. Granted, the defense kept them in that Fresno State game, and I do think that it'll be much harder for Texas to turn around and hang 52 on the Wolverines. But at the same time, you've got to score points in this league, and you can't rely on your defense for a pick 6 late in the game when you're only up 6 against a team like Fresno State.
Big part of scoring points is going to come down to the quarterback. And they kind of did something unusual in week 1. They had 2 quarterbacks, which the old saying, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But where does that currently stand when it comes to Alex Orji and Davis Warren? Like, obviously, Davis was charged more with being the actual thrower of the football, while they decided to use Orji as more of like a runner. And he was effective, but like, how do you think they balance that? Do you think it will be as much of a split as it was against Fresno, or do you think they were just week 1, let's try some stuff out?
Well, I think that Sharon Moore isn't going to tip his hand either way. Going into even 1 week ago at this time when we were talking to him in his pregame press conference about who the starting quarterback was, he said it had to play out over the week. And then again, after the game against Fresno State, he kind of reiterated, which I was surprised about, that Davis won the job during the week. I get the sense that maybe Hugh knew all along that it was going to be Davis. He certainly has a little better acumen. I mean, what an incredible story this guy is, too. He goes from battling cancer to a walk-on, and now he's the starting quarterback at the University of Michigan. It's really inspirational, but he certainly seems to pick things up. He struggled a lot, I think, because of the fact that early on they didn't have the run game going. And that's going to hurt any quarterback, especially a guy who can stand in the pocket and deliver a good deep ball. But at the same time, the guys were missing blocks on him. They didn't have a run game going. He didn't have time. He didn't have protection. So I think a lot of his deficiencies were a little bit more well-defined, if you will, because of that offensive line. So that's one area where Sharon Moore has said we've got to get better along the offensive line, and every single area as well, even the defense as well as they played. There's still room for improvement, but I don't expect that Sharon Moore will continue to use a 2 quarterback system. To your point, that if they really had a bona fide starter, they wouldn't be doing these, the split roles. But I mean, give them credit. If Alex Orji does continue to show that he has some mobility and the ability to, run some wildcat, anything like that, make the offense different, throw some things at them that they won't be expecting. I think it's only a bonus for them if they have more offensive weapons on the field, because certainly they lost a lot of them.
A big part of the offensive weapons is going to be, well, Donovan Edwards, running back there. And he wasn't as efficient as you would have liked in that game. Clearly, it seemed like his backup had a little bit more steam behind him going into that game. So what do you think the adjustment is? Do you think they give Donovan Edwards more run as the starter, or do you think it's time that they start going to other backs?
I think Mullins was incredible. And anytime you've got a running back who can churn out yards and he can make something out of nothing, or he can get yards after contact, that's what we saw number 20 do that entire game. And that was really what opened the passing game for him to hit Loveland with that touchdown late. And it completely energized the offense. Michigan is a program that wants to run the ball. Sharon Moore is kind of cut from that Jim Harbaugh cloth, run the ball. And it's not exactly, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but they want to be able to dominate and control the line of scrimmage. And if they have a running back like Mullins who can continue to do that and get those tough yards and those yards after contact, it's going to make everybody's job a whole lot easier, including Davis Warren, or if they put Alex Orji in there for a drive or for a play or two.
You did also allude to the offensive line as well. 5 new starters on that offensive line. And the defense against the Longhorns, I thought, was actually the biggest story against that win against Colorado State. You expect the offense to have a field day against the Rams, who are one of the worst pass defenses in college football. But what the defense did, completely shutting down that air raid, impressed me. So I guess my question there is just going to be, how does this offensive line hope to adjust after allowing 7 pressures against Fresno State, who is not known as necessarily an elite defense themselves?
Yeah, they're going to have to stack. They're going to have to go heavy. They're going to have to make a lot of adjustments, and they're going to have to prepare their tails off, because this is undoubtedly the toughest challenge that they have faced in the regular season going back at least 4 years, let alone in the big house. As I mentioned, this is a team that's won 23 straight games at home. They only play 4 top 25s this year, but 3 of them are in their conference. So things are going to be really challenging for the Wolverines early on. And as soon as a team like that's built its identity on running the ball and the offensive, pressure, protection, power up front starts to slip a little, then people are going to start, questioning and finger pointing. And I think that is one thing that they've got to avoid. We knew this was going to be a down year for Michigan. They lost so many players. They lost Jim Harbaugh. Sharon Moore is capable, obviously, of coaching that national championship team that won last year, but they are a very different team. He will really have to earn his money, and we'll have to see if he's able to get the most out of these guys in their toughest game yet. It's going to be a heck of a game, and I am fired up to see it. But I'll tell you, I would take Texas laying 7.
Sharon Moore, it's obviously his first year as the coach out there, taking over for Jim Harbaugh. Do you think it was the right call for them to stick with Moore without really opening up the coaching search as much? It kind of feels like they made their decision right out the gate after Harbaugh left.
Yeah, they did pretty quickly, and I don't have a problem with it. I think that Sharon Moore certainly is a guy who is qualified. These players love him. That is part of the element that did get him that job, tip the scales in his favor. But also, he proved himself in an interim position at the beginning of the year in 1 game, and then in the final 3 games of the season, most notably coaching that team to a win against Ohio State. And I think that he definitely deserved it. He's a guy that's been very entrenched in that offense. Their offensive line has been, award worthy the last 2 seasons. So he's a guy that's been there, done that. He's also got a lot of recruits out on the trail, guys that he's really won and secured in Ann Arbor. So that's a huge selling point for the team to keep him in there. And I do think that they're going to find their way under Sharon. I don't think that he's outmatched or the job is too big for him. But anytime any national champ loses more than a dozen starters, you're going to be, up against it. There's a lot of growing pains that this team has to go through. And the fact that they get Texas so early in the season, it's definitely going to be a challenge game for them.
What do you make of the Wink Martindale influence, him coming over as the DC? Did you see it in week 1? And how aggressive do you think this defense will be?
Yeah, we did start to see some of that aggressive play. Certainly they were burned by it a little bit, but then you had that amazing pick 6. I mean, these guys are good. They've got a really talented defensive front. Wink Martindale is the kind of guy who wants to just blitz every chance he gets. He even admitted we didn't blitz nearly as much as we wanted to. So maybe they're keeping something up their sleeve for Texas, but I think that could be problematic. You got to have the guys in the back end to cover. And there were a lot of times, he loves to also play a defense where they play a lot of nickel, dime, even going to a 25 personnel. And there were some times where they got burned on the back end because they didn't have their studs out there on the corner. So they have got to make sure that they've got all of their T's crossed and all of the I's dotted, especially on defense, because that unit is going to really have to win this game for them.
Final score prediction?
Well, it's not going to be 52. I'd say let's go 31-17 Texas.
Okay, nice. I'm sure the fans here in Austin will appreciate that coming up from.
Sorry, don't tell my friends in Ann Arbor.
Secret
I'm
is
not in this
safe
business
here.
to make friends.
Thank you so much, Jennifer Hammond, Fox Detroit. We'll see you next time.
Yep, absolutely.
Day ones, the diehards, the first timers, the old timers, for all the rivalry matches, buzzer beaters, and come from behind miracles. It's not just stats and wins and losses, it's the moments, the shots you can't believe went in, the times you can't do anything but believe. And it's all streaming right here on your connected TV anytime on Fox Local.
The Sports Office, streaming anytime on Fox Local.